Hello, everyone. I'm Suzanne Gut, and I am going to be working with you today talking about why we have students learning what we're having them learn in the classroom. I just want to give you a brief introduction to me. I have been a career teacher my whole life. I've been teaching for a long time in high school and in two-year colleges and in four-year colleges and universities. And right now I am also working as a grant and proposal writer in the private sector. So I feel I have a very good working knowledge of both areas, and I'm hoping to bring that to you. Of course, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and you don't have to save them until the end. If you want to talk about them during the presentation, please put something in the chat and I will be happy to answer that or discuss it or talk about it with you. And I often think that when we as teachers come to these types of conferences and workshops and seminars, sometimes we don't learn anything groundbreaking or really new, but it's always nice to affirm that other people are having these issues and to discuss them and brainstorm some solutions. So hopefully today you come away with some new information or it sparks some new ideas in how you can maybe adjust lessons that you've been teaching or implement new lessons into your curriculum. So I think let's get started because we have a lot to cover in a short period of time. So students are always asking, why do we have to learn this? Teaching is an uphill struggle every single day. Getting students to be able to do their homework, do the lessons, understand the course material, and really connect to what we're doing, right? We love these areas because we've chosen this as our life work, but they may not have that understanding or that joy yet. So my research niche is in communications, composition, linguistics, and public speaking. I am an English person, but for a long time, I taught at a university that focused on health and technology and business. And my students were always asking in all three of the English classes that they were required to take, why are we learning this? Why do we have to know how to do what you're presenting? I'm going to be an accountant. Why do I have to learn how to write an essay? I'm going to be a computer programmer. Why do I have to know how to give a persuasive speech? I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to be taking blood pressure and drawing blood. Why do I need to know about discourse analysis? And so it made me really start thinking about why I teach the lessons that I teach and why I teach them in this way. And it also makes you wonder and doubt yourself because those students are persistent and they always ask, right? Why are we learning this? Why do we have to know this? And then you start asking as a teacher, am I making an impact? And the answer to that question is yes, we are making a difference. But usually as teachers, we don't feel that impact or acknowledge that impact, or students don't acknowledge that impact for us immediately. Sometimes it takes a while. For example, I recently heard from a former student. She had not been my student for more than 10 years, but she heard of a job opportunity in my city and thought, Suzanne would be perfect for this. I could really see her doing this. So she contacted me and said, hey, I'm not sure if you are looking for work or you're looking for this type of work, but I really think that you would be excellent in this. And she said, I really wanted to take the opportunity to do something nice for you because I use something that you taught me every day in my current job. She said, my career success is largely because of you. And I wanted to give you something back. And it was such a nice affirmation of all the things that I had done as her instructor, her professor, to ready her for the career field that she didn't even realize until 10 years later. And it worked out. I went for the job opportunity and I got it and I really like it. So, all those connections are really good. So even though it feels like we're pulling this rock uphill every single day, it does have rewards, I promise you. But there are a lot of barriers and there's a lot of what I call noise that gets in the way, right? The everyday implications for the content that we're teaching are very, very clear to us. We see those connections, but we should see those connections because we've been doing this for a long time. We've been talking about it and we've had to sell our ideas for grants to department chairs, to other programs, to curriculum committees, right? We've worked with other colleagues in other departments. We see the benefit of interdisciplinary studies, but this is what we've chosen to do for our living and we're in it, right? So we are accustomed to making those connections. And it's easy, I think, sometimes to forget why the students aren't. Like, why aren't the students really excited about this lesson that I prepared, right? I spent a long time thinking about this and getting them interested, and they didn't seem to care. So we need to keep in mind that these students, if we're talking about traditional undergraduate students, they're 18 to 23, 22 years old. They have limited experience. They just aren't in the workforce. They may have had jobs before, but that's different than having a professional career in many cases. So they just have limited experience. Also, we know that science tells us that their prefrontal cortex is not developed, right? It won't be developed until maybe 25. So after they're out of university and they're working some jobs. And so their reasoning and their rationale skills, the rational center of their brain isn't fully developed yet. It's getting there. It's in process, but it is not 100%. And I think that we tend to forget that because they're talking sort of like adults. They're acting sort of like adults. Some undergrads don't. But many times, we think that they should be doing more than they are. But, when they're 18 or 19, that's still really young. And we think we know what we're doing. But I think about when I was 18 and 19 and thinking, yeah, I know things. I'm an adult. I didn't know anything. And I wasn't really an adult. We have to remember that coming to university is very, very stressful for them. They have lots of new demands. Their high school may have been very rigorous and may have prepared them, but it's still new. New teachers, new course mates, new readings, new structure for assignments, new schedules. It's all that's a lot to take in, especially in their first or second semester at the university. And they feel that pressure and that stress weighs on them a lot. And sometimes they're just trying to get through the class. They're just trying to get through this week or next week. They're not thinking about the next 2 years or 5 years or 10 years of their career. And because this is a new environment, they have lots of distractions. Right? There's lots of events they can attend. They're making new friends and spending time with them. I hear that undergrads, there are always parties going on I don't know, right? Of course, they're being social because that's fun and they're asserting their independence and what they, want to do. And events and friends and parties are usually way more fun than reading 50 or 60 or 70 pages or writing a 20-page paper or doing an experiment or writing up a lab that they've done. And so we're up against this. And sometimes they just don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And so we need to help them with that. And I really like to think, because I know a lot of my undergrad students, they envision adult life. They think about where they are now and they think about 10 years from now or 5 years from now, but they're thinking about the independence and they're thinking about the car and the salary and maybe buying a house or getting a better apartment and being able to go on vacation. Those things they see and aim for in adult life, but they many times don't think about adulting, which is a term that we're now using in the States to represent all of the pressures and the stress that you have as an adult. So they see getting paid a great salary or a decent salary. They see doing a job that they really, really like. Oh, they're really into marketing, or they're really into accounting, or they really want to be a nurse or a doctor, and they're very excited about that, which is great. But they don't think about the client who is unhappy and sends a really angry email or has an angry phone call. They are not thinking about deadlines that need to be met. And so I had a student say, "Oh, I can't wait until I'm not in university anymore. Then I won't have to stay up all night doing projects." And I remember laughing a little, thinking, well, I haven't been in university for quite some time, and I'm still up very late at night working on projects for clients or working with clients. So it doesn't always go away. And the bad group projects that you have as a student, you may also have as a professional, right? You're waiting on information from clients before you can submit a report, or you need a final approval from a client and they're not giving it to you because they're busy doing other things. So it does help us to make sure that we're helping them envision all aspects of professional careers. So how can we work on breaking through the noise, right? I think first and foremost, we have to stop making a distinction between academics and the real world. I hear this all the time and I read this all the time, especially for instructors, that we need to get our students ready for the real world. And I know what people are trying to say, but again, my 18, 19, 20-year-old students may not. And they're starting to see this divide between what they're doing in school as unreal and what they're doing, what or will be doing in the workforce as real. And that is the only thing that counts. And I've had many students say to me, I don't know why I have to read this book, or I don't know why I have to work on this paper. I just want to be working and making money and making my own choices. And so I always come back with, school is real, right? The stress they feel, the experiments they're doing, the feelings they have, the knowledge base that they're growing, their failures, their successes, the assignments, their friendships, those critical thinking skills, everything that they are doing in school is real. They feel it, you know it. And so if it weren't real, we wouldn't be having them do it. And so we have to make sure that we're explaining to them that we're giving them tools so they can easily transition these skills, right? They can transfer these skills to another environment, another real environment, and be successful. Right? because I think as teachers, especially as teachers, we know that the job you do every day doesn't always equate to doing a job. It doesn't always include your skill set that you trained for at university, right? In the States, we always have a clause in our job descriptions or in our contracts, other duties as assigned. And that just becomes the catch-all phrase of anything else that we want you to do that you're contracted to do it. So maybe that's working independently with students. Maybe that's working with a student organization or editing the university webpage or newsletter or paper. All of these are different. But I know if you've been a teacher for 1 year or 41 years, at some point, a student will or has shown up at your office stressed out and crying and wanting to talk. And usually it has nothing to do with the course content, right? I mean, I've been in my office many times where a student will knock on the door, a student I don't know, and say, "Excuse me, are you a faculty member?" And I think, oh, who wants to know what's happening, what's going on? But what they want to know is, can you help me? I need another person. I need an adult. I need someone who knows how to navigate this system, knows how to introduce me into this community of practice. And so there have been many times where I have helped students, has nothing to do with English. For example, one time I had a student, I was traveling with students on a study abroad experience. And there was one student in particular who really, really needed to do laundry. His clothes were really dirty. And we thought, the other instructors and I were like, maybe, why isn't he doing laundry? Oh, maybe he doesn't know. So I said, let me work with him. I have a good rapport with him. And I said, you're not doing laundry. You need to do laundry. Do you know how to do laundry? And he said, I don't. And so I said, okay, let's go to the laundry room and I will teach you. And I thought, well, it'll just be the two of us, no problem. In the course of me teaching him how to run the washing machine, 4 or 5 other students that I didn't know who weren't part of our program approached me and said, can I listen to this? Because I don't know how to do it either. Can I ask you a question? What does this button mean? How much soap do I put in? And I literally gave a seminar in how to do laundry. And, this is something they never prepared me for when I was getting my undergrad or my master's or my PhD. Coursework doesn't tell you about this, but as teachers, we see this a lot. And so, helping them break through the noise and understanding that all of these things are real, and this empathy and this well-roundedness is going to help them in their future careers, because we're asked to do a lot of things as humans. We're asked, to be good to other humans. And I like to think of it as a balance. And I like this triangle effect, right? That we are very involved in theory and research as professors, as teachers. This is what we really like. This is what got us excited about this field in the first place, right? And some of that theory is very, very difficult, and it's very heavy, as we've talked about. And it's not always easy, and it takes a long time to understand. It takes a long time to read. But students, especially younger students, they aren't used to spending a lot of time sitting still and thinking and reading, because they're doing a lot of social media, or they're spending a lot of time on their phones or watching movies or TV, where everything is coming at them very quickly and changing very rapidly, right? And so they can be on Instagram, or they can be on whatever social media platform they have, and then very quickly text a friend or FaceTime with someone or Zoom or whatever they're doing, or StreamYarding with someone. And so they can multitask a lot, and sitting down and concentrating on one reading is maybe not something that they have a lot of experience with. They tend to like a lot of the practice, right? Because that is a little more hands-on. It's a little more practical. They can see the direct implication. But bridging those two and making those connections, that's our job as teachers, right? And that's where we really need to be putting a lot of our focus and a lot of our time. And I think I said this as a teacher, I probably say this more than anything else, right? How this is getting you career ready. This is a connection. Make sure that you are remembering this when you get a job, because sometimes if you're teaching freshmen, you're teaching 18 or 19-year-olds, they won't be using this work in their careers until much later. So you have to re-emphasize it again and again and again so that it sticks with them. So 3 or 4 years from now, they understand. And I also think as teachers, we really need to work interdisciplinarily, right? So if you're teaching 18 and 19-year-olds, you're teaching first-year students, you really need to make it a priority to be connecting with and working with the professors that they're going to see in their last year of school, in their senior year of school, so that they can be reminded that they did have these core lessons and that they are going to be using them. And then they see the connection of freshman classes, sophomore classes, junior classes, senior classes, and then that's getting them ready for graduate school. It's getting them ready for a career. It's getting them ready for a career change. And it's definitely letting them know that they're being prepared. Okay. Yes, please. If you have questions or comments and you want to put them in the chat, I would really be interested to hear what you're thinking, because I know that as teachers, you're doing this already. I know you are. And so we just need to reemphasize what we're doing. And I want to hear from you. So how do we do this? I want us to start thinking about these, instead of real life or real world lessons, I just want to go with life lessons. What can we do to help these students? And how can we make it, the connections, very clear for them? So the first way is to rethink our traditional lessons. What are some lessons that you have been teaching for a while, or that everyone in your department needs to teach? And so when in teaching freshman composition, we're all having them write the same types of essays, right? We have to write an argumentative essay. They have to write a persuasive essay. They have to write a descriptive essay. And so I like to think about, okay, this is traditional and they've probably done some work on this in high school. How can I make it a little different? How can I make it a little more job focused? How can I take it out of what they're used to writing and make it more applicable to the workforce? So we're going to talk about that a little bit. How can we directly connect to careers and ultimately show when or how they're going to use their course material, right? They may know when, they may not know how. And I think that's a big distinction, and that we should definitely be talking about that. So I want to run through some of the assignments and some of the ideas that I have used successfully in my classrooms. And so hopefully you get some good information out of that. Or I would like to hear if you want to share what you've been doing in classrooms. or in lessons to teach. So I'm just going to jump in. So this first one I really like because I know that you have another session, or there was a session offered or will be offered for growth mindset. And I really like that idea of getting out of the goal oriented or the goal focused teaching, right? So I think in every institution I've ever taught at, people are having, English departments are having students write resumes, right? Let's have them write a resume. Let's have them write a cover letter. Let's get them on their path to employment, which is great. But resumes, I find, are very siloed. They're very limited. It's one item that they're looking at, and it's easy to see that in isolation. And now they have a big choice. They can go out and they can Google or they can search resume templates. And then they just pick one and they fill it out. And they have no idea, is it a good design? Is it not a good design? Is it just something that I like? And so you have to walk them through that. How can we address students who are skeptical about the value of what they're learning in class? Yes. So they're going to ask you, why are we learning this? What's the value in this? So then I would show them every day, go to the newspapers, go to the news, tell them what's happening globally and say, how is what we're learning? Ask them, how is what we're learning connected? What connections can you make? And they may struggle with that. You may have to help prompt them. But I would just stop and take time when there's something big in it going on, globally or in the world, and say, how does this, impact? So when I was doing discourse analysis with students, and they go, yeah, I don't really, why are we learning this? What's the value in picking apart words? And I would go out there and I would look at advertisements, and I would have them, I'm like, go out there and find your favorite advertisement right now. What's your favorite product? And bring in the advertisement. And then we would look at the words, and I said, why are they choosing these words? And we would look at pictures. Why are they choosing those pictures? Or we would go out and look at news stories from 3 different news sources and say, okay, this news source reported this event this way. Another one reported it a little differently. A third one reported it different. It's all the same event. Why do you think that they chose those specific words? Why do you think they chose that specific focus? What do you like about this? What don't you like about this? And when you start really talking about it and bringing in things that are happening in their world, right? Pick something that's happening on campus. Pick something, that you hear them complaining about in the hallways, because I always heard that. And then you can start to see the value and ask them, right? What do you consider valuable? And then how do you plug that in? How do you equate that to what's happening? And so I think, a lot of times we have to have those conversations with students. And sometimes that means putting down the lesson you planned for the day and having a conversation about it. Because once they start talking, they're probably going to be very open about it, and then start to realize, like, this is important, right? Oh, that's a hard one, about getting students to not know what they want to do. Actually, I really like it when students come up to me and they say, oh, I'm undecided. I don't know what I want to do. I know I'm at university and I thought I wanted to do business, but now I'm not sure. And I love that, because when you're 18, 19, 20, that's the time, right, that you should be exploring. That's the time that you should be wondering, what do I really want to do? And so I say, take some classes and see what you like, see what you don't like, right? I love lists, and I tell my students this. I always tend to make, I call it a good old-fashioned pro-con list. What are some things I'm really, really good at? What are some things I'm not very good at? What are some things I really like? What are some things I really don't like? And then think, what are maybe some careers that could fall into that? Or, you just know, I know that I want to live in a big city. I know that I want to live in the country. What are jobs that are amenable to either of those places, right? And so you can have them start doing some research. And so, that might help them find motivation to do something that you like. I've had lots of students come into my office and they say, well, my parents really want me to be an accountant, and I really hate doing accountancy. I'm good at it, but I really don't like it. Okay, what do you like? And so they were like, oh, I like video games, or I like anime, or I like science, whatever it is they like. And then you think, okay, could we bridge those two ideas? What careers out there that work with numbers and budget and also work with video games, right? Someone has to be an accountant for Nintendo. Someone has to be an accountant for these big video game companies, and they never think about that. They go, oh, I guess, yeah, they would need accountants, or they would need marketers, or they would need whatever. And so if you can start giving them help to find maybe a different angle, if you can pivot their thinking a little bit and connect those ideas. I once sat next to a lovely young gentleman on a plane. He was 17. And he was talking to me about, because it was summer or spring break. He was on spring break vacation. And he said, yeah, I'm not going to be in school for a week, but that's okay, because we're really not learning anything. But I do have a book report, but I'm not interested in it. I said, well, what are you interested in? We started talking about, he really loved music, and he really loved going to concerts. But he was also very into mechanics and being an electrician. And so I said, well, why don't you, and he lived in Chicago. And I said, well, there are lots of concerts that happen in Chicago, and you're going into the summer. Why don't you go out to one of those big amphitheaters or arenas and see if you could get a summer internship, being a roadie, being on the road crew, and setting up concerts for people that come in. That way you have a job, you have work experience, and you get to see a lot of free concerts. And he thought that that was maybe the best idea he'd ever heard. And he said, wow, my teachers never told me about that. Thank you so much. He said, I wish you were my teacher. And I thought, well, your teachers have probably been saying things like that, but sometimes it helps when you hear it from somebody else. Great questions. I really, really like them. Thank you. So I also, with careers, I have them have students research 2 or 3 jobs in a chosen field, or in a field they think they might be interested in, right? If they haven't chosen a field, then have them look for jobs in an area where they think they might want to live, right? At least where I am in the United States, it's really cold right now. So my students are always like, oh, I want to live somewhere warm by the beach. Okay, great. Find a job somewhere warm near the beach, and then have them look at some entry-level jobs, something they could do immediately upon graduation, or an internship. And then I like to have them look for an upper management, or what's the next step in that career, because they're probably not going to be an entry level their whole career. And then I have them look locally, look throughout the country, go globally. How about remote positions or hybrid positions? Could you work for one of those? And then I have them put a chart together, and I've given you an example on the chart. I have them list the criteria. What is that job description saying, right? What do they want from potential employees or from candidates? And then it's just a simple yes or no column. Yes, I have leadership experience. And then I want them to put something down there that proves it. right? You can't just say you have leadership experience. Show me you have leadership experience. Okay, this job is requiring a master's degree. Do you have a master's degree? No. Okay. So what are you going to have to do to achieve that goal? So 10 years out, 5 years out after you graduate undergrad, what are you going to have to continue to do to get those better jobs for that adult life that you are envisioning? And then from there, that gives them it gives them a really good idea of where they are right now and where they think they might want to be. It's going to help them create a resume. It'll help them create a cover letter. It'll help them create a personal statement. It will help them when they have to give answers to interview questions. It will help them articulate and really materialize what it is they might want to do. How can we teach students to value the process of learning itself, rather than just outcomes like grades or degrees? Boy, if I had an answer to that, I think I would be a billionaire, because it's really hard to have students understand the value of intrinsic learning, right? Just doing it for the love of knowledge, for the love of learning. And so especially, I know in the United States, we put a lot of emphasis on grades. We put a lot of emphasis on a degree and a GPA, a grade point average. Students always want to know. And lately, in the last 10 years, I have heard a lot of, I have to pass this class. I don't know what to do. I'm failing your class. And I think, you're failing my class? And I look, and they're earning a 91%. That's not even close to failing. And I say, you're getting an A minus, you're getting a 91%. And they said, I know, I need to have at least a 98. And I think, what are we doing to these poor kids? And so we're putting a lot of value on that. I do have some colleagues who have adopted a practice called ungrading, and I'm going to put that in the chat. And that is a theory, a method that teachers can use where it takes the emphasis off the grade. You're not getting grades on each of the papers, but you will at the end. Because I know sometimes when you don't grade something, students won't do it, because where's the reward in that, right? And so it's more about the process of learning. And I really emphasize that too, that we're doing work and we're working towards a goal. Here's our end objective, but we have all these different steps before we can get there. But having them love learning just, intrinsically is really hard. I think it helps when you connect it to something that they do. So I love to ask my gamers and my athletes, right? Like, why do you go on a 5K run every day? And some say, well, because I have to, my coach makes me do it. And other people say, I just love it because it makes me feel better. And so then I say, okay, that feeling is what I get when I read research, or I am conducting research, or I'm learning something new. And then you can ask them, how many of you have ever found something out on social media and you find out it's true and it's contradictory to everything that you've learned? They're going to say yes about it. And then you can talk about, this is what history gives us. This is why we have to have good archives. This is why you have to be lifelong learners, so that when there's, a lot of disinformation and misinformation on social media and in the world, you can see the difference and make your own choices and have your own opinions and be a critical thinker. And that takes time. How do we handle it when students just aren't interested in learning at all? hard. Sometimes you just have to admit defeat, right? I've had those hard conversations with students in my office. They come to my office, they're missing 2 or 3 assignments, and I say, you are not going to pass this class unless you make a very significant turn. And I said, how are you doing in all your other classes? Not good. I'm failing. And I look at them and I just say, do you want to be at university at all? Do you want to be in school at all? And almost always they sit up and they look at me and they almost always say, no one has ever asked me that question before. And I said, well, I'm asking now. What do you want to be doing? Because it's clearly not school. And they say, oh, I want to be playing sports. I want to be working this job. I want to be doing something else. And I run through some options with them. I said, why are you at school? Many times my students in the States will tell me, because my parents are expecting it. My parents are making me. And then we talk about why that is. It's much easier to talk to somebody who's not your parent, right? It's easier to talk to somebody who's detached from that, like a counselor or a mentor. And then I said, you can't just tell your parents you don't want to study in school. You have to have a plan. So what is your plan? And then we talk about what that student could be doing and how it could affect them. And we look at salaries that they could be achieving. And sometimes that really helps. And sometimes they just need a semester or a year and to not be interested in school and to not have that pressure. And while I'm sure my dean would not appreciate me telling students not to come to school, I do think that the student will appreciate, and overall the university will appreciate, stronger, more engaged students. And that student may be back, right? They may just need some time. And then if they aren't interested in learning at all, find some common ground. What are they interested in? And then can you get them learning in that realm, in that field? And, doing this resume, like you have to have a job. You can't just live in your parents' house or apartment for the rest of your life being unproductive. And if they say, well, all I really want to do is play video games, okay, then let's look for careers. Let's look for jobs in the video game world. Do you want to be a tester? Do you want to be a professional gamer? Because that's absolutely a career now. Do you want to be in sales? What do you want to do? What's your favorite thing? Knowing that no career is perfect, right? I love being a teacher. I really hate grading papers. So if I never had to grade another paper again, that would be a dream job. But as we all know, as teachers, that is never going to happen. So I always laugh with one of my teacher friends that when you have students who aren't very experienced or aren't very prepared, but they're very eager to learn, those are great students. When you have students who are very, very smart and they're not motivated, okay, that's fine too. You can work with those students because they're going to get the work done anyway and quickly. But it's really, really hard when you have students who are not motivated, who don't have the preparation and they aren't motivated, right? And so I either think they're stressed out because they don't know, like their skill set is below others in the class, or they're really bored. And so you have to figure out where the disconnect is and why they're not interested. But it's a great question. Yes, right? It is. Like, we've all had those times where you're like, I spent hours making this lesson interesting for you, and half of you are sleeping or drawing on your paper or you're on your phone. And so it's really easy to lose your cool, right? To get angry and yell at the students. But again, I think it's really, sometimes you have to take a step back and realize that it is not usually about you. Remember, they have all of those other things going on. And so maybe somebody just broke up with them, right? Their boyfriend or girlfriend just broke up with them, and that's what they're thinking about, right? They're heartbroken, or they really miss being at home and they miss their dog or their cat, or they had a fight with their roommate, or they were up all night and they're just really tired. And sometimes they're just tired, right? They don't want to be there learning. You don't want to be there teaching. We all have those days. And so sometimes my advice on how to stay motivated and inspire students in this kind of situation, there have been many times where I had a really big lesson planned, and I walk in and I see the students, I read their body language, right? They are tired. Their eyes are drooping, their shoulders are here, they're sitting here like this. And I go, you know what? We were going to talk about dependent clauses or independent clauses or whatever we were going to talk about today. But I think let's not. Let's do something else. And I always have something ready to go, some sort of activity that gets them moving and gets them laughing, something that I know that they're really going to like. And we do something totally different and it energizes them. Sometimes I let them out 20 minutes or 30 minutes early. Like, you know what, you guys, let's just go. It's cold, it's rainy, you're tired, I'm tired. Let's just pick it up next week. And sometimes just doing that really inspires and motivates the students. I've had students who have said, oh my, or I'll say, you know, this paper is due tonight, but don't worry, I'm giving you until next week. And I've had more students say, thank you so much for understanding the stress and the pressure that students feel. It was really, really helpful. And it was exactly what I needed, right? I mean, sometimes we just need a nap. Maybe that's just me because I'm old. Maybe I just need a nap. I'm not sure. What is the most important quality or skill we as teachers can have to help our students develop to get their first job? To understand what core skill you think we should be the main focus and help them succeed. I think the best thing that we can do as teachers is to give them the skill of big picture thinking, right? To help them start thinking that it's not about the assignment. And really, your 3.8 out of 4 GPA is important to an extent, but it's what you're learning that really helps you. And so I think the best tool that we can give them is critical thinking and keeping your eye on the goal, right? The goal is a useful career, being an employable person, being a good manager, being a strong colleague, being a mentor, and that you are going, or they are going to hit obstacles along the way, and to not be deterred by them, and to really, you know, eye on the prize. That's maturity. That's longevity. That's true learning. Learning to say, okay, I really failed at this, but I'm failing forward, right? What did I learn from not hitting that goal, and how can I do better? I think that is really being able to bounce back from setbacks and see a bigger picture. Like, okay, this was not my finest moment, but what can I do better the next time I'm in that situation? And that is really a useful tool. That and empathy, I think, being empathetic and learning that other people have different priorities, and other people that you are working with don't see things the way you see them, but being able to work with them and not be stressed out. I was in my job. I'm the old one in my job, I'm the mom. And I was working with someone who was 24 and it was her first job. And she was stressed to the point of being ill every day. And she was working her normal work hours. She was working at night. She was working on the weekends because, she said, well, the rules, the process says we have to do all of these things and I have to do them and I have to do them exactly right. And I said, you don't have to do that exactly, right? They're learning to be a little bit flexible will really help you. And so I said, not everybody here is doing every single one of these things. The job will still get done. It's more important that we do it right and we have a quality product, not that we do it on time, right? If the client is, you said you would get it done at 9:00 and it doesn't get done until 9:15, they will live. Everyone will live. Everyone gets used to disappointment. So I think that, having students learn how to be flexible is really important, and to see the bigger picture, right? In the grand scheme of things, this is, 15 minutes that a client had to wait is not the end of the world. And that has really helped a lot of my students. And if I'm being honest, it has really helped me remember that, right? That sometimes when I get stressed out, I think this is just one project and one client. I've done other projects for this client that they've been really happy with. This is just one moment in time. And so, to be flexible. And I think in that flexibility too, they will also find new opportunities that they might have said no to if they were not looking for them and not open for them. But that's a great question. Really great question. I think we just have a few minutes left. And so I have more slides. I can talk about more, but I really want to make sure that I'm answering your questions. And I know we've talked a little bit about this. I really want you to focus with these students on a growth mindset. I really do think that's really important. And if we have that, it helps us throughout our whole careers. But we can't just do it for our students. We also have to do it for ourselves as teachers, right? And we have to solicit that feedback and really take it seriously, right? It's hard. It's hard to get feedback. And students are brutal. They're so honest. They will tell you exactly what they like and what they don't like. And sometimes it's really hard to hear. But if you're not addressing them as your audience, they're probably not going to be motivated. They won't be interested in what you're teaching. But once you give them agency, well, you don't really give agency. Once they enact agency and they have some voting right in their own learning experience, I think you get a lot more interaction, right? I love saying to students, hey, students, you want to read this article or this article? Do you want to do this type of assignment or that type of assignment? And when they have that ability to choose, they love it and they do a much better job. The most unexpected skill or lesson students have thanked you for teaching them later in life. I teach public speaking, and in public speaking classes, I always ask them to do a demonstration speech because, in their careers, if they're in sales, they'll have to demonstrate a product. If they're a manager, they'll have to demonstrate to their team how to fill out forms or how to work through a process. If they're in human resources, they're going to have to learn how to explain that. So if they're heading a research team and they're doing experiments, or they're going to be professors and they're going to be helping grad students, we always will have a demonstration. And so my demonstration example is to tell them how to fold a fitted bed sheet, the one with the elastic. And they always say, we never forget that lesson. We always remember that lesson. And now we know how to do laundry. Apparently I do English and laundry. This is what I do. Okay. Okay, this our last question. Because where do you find your motivation and inspiration as a teacher? It is challenging, and there are some days where I just go, "That's it. I hate this. The students aren't motivated. I hate grading papers. I hate going into class. That's it. I'm not doing this anymore." And then some student comes up to me and says, "Thank you so much. You changed my life. I changed my whole major, or I really, you were really tough on me and I appreciate it. And thank you so much for what you do." And then I'm like, "Oh, dang, now I have to be a teacher for another year." Like, I get motivated all over again when when you hear, when you see. Like, I love seeing students when they're 18 and a mess. And then I see them at 22 or 23 graduating, and they're adults and they're amazing people, and watching them grow from young adults into amazing professionals. Nothing better. That's where I get my motivation. So I think our time is up. Thank you all so much for attending this. I hope you learned something today. And I will put information, contact information, or I think the center has my contact information. But good luck, be well, keep being inspirational.